Welcome to Recovery Unfiltered. I'm Larry. I'm an alcoholic.
I am Rob. I am also an alcoholic. We are not professionals. There are no letters after our names. We know very little. However, you will hear the word God and a four-letter word in the same sentence. You will also be offended. So if you are easily offended, just pass us by. This podcast is not for you.
Our opinions are just that. If you don't agree with what we're saying, that's okay. We're going to love you anyways. We are not in any way affiliated with AA.
So sit back, grab a beverage of your choice, and get ready.
Let's go. Right back at it, brother.
Right back at it. Hey, we don't have any letters after our names, but
our guest does.
Our guest does.
I beat you to that one because I've been excited to say it.
I was wondering. That's what I started when I started talking again. Are you going to play the old one, or are we going to do the new one?
No, I'm going to stay on the old one for a while.
But then the letters, that
we have somebody with letters on our podcast today, and I'm so freaking excited about this.
We actually got smart people.
I'm gonna bring her in because I can't stand it. I've been waiting for this. Me and this girl's been talking for a couple months now. Young lady. We've been going back and forth, and the closer it got to us recording together, the more excited I got. And here's the funny thing about it. You want to talk about God being involved in this? The closer and closer we got to this, because it started with the California Sober is when this all started. That podcast is what started it. And that's been a couple months ago since we recorded that. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's just been kept rolling downhill. And every time it gets closer and closer to this, more things keep popping up with the plant-based medicines that are coming up.
Right.
And then actually Joe Rogan's Rick Perry and why do I keep forgetting that man's name?
Brian Hubbard. Brian Hubbard.
His podcast landed on this week, and I just was all over that one because it's Iguban, and
she'll know.
She will. Anyway, and I'm was all over it doing research on that because the first time I'd heard of it, right? And I sent it to her, and she really was new with it herself. So it's a new. But I learned about it. But anyways, I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to bring this.
No, you're
girl,
not. You never shut up.
Shut up. So hey, what we got here? We got Rachel Berry. She's coming in with us. She is months away from completing her PhD in clinical psychology. She currently has a master's degree in psychology and will become a clinical psychologist upon receiving her doctorate from Palo Alto University. Her clinical background has included working with veterans experiencing substance use disorders, homelessness, severe mental illness, and dual diagnosis in both residential and outpatient setting. Rachel currently provides addiction and trauma treatment for veterans at the VA Sierra Nevada healthcare system. Rachel's research interests include drug and non-drug addictions, harm reduction, psychedelic drugs, and homelessness. And she has previously taught several courses about addiction and addiction treatment as an adjunct faculty member for Palo Alto University undergraduate psychology department. Welcome in, Rachel. I'm so excited.
Hi, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We finally got somebody smart enough to straighten me and Rob out.
Oh no, I don't want to set your expectations too high.
Hey, anybody's better than what him and I could do. I promise you.
Love it.
And as I'm sure Rachel knows, expectations can lead to resentments and disappointments. So, and addicts and alcoholics need to watch out for our.
I'm going to let you and Rob talk about how you come to know our show. So go ahead, Rob.
Yeah. Well, as we talked, a common friend, Robert, he don't mind if I'm saying his first name. He kept texting me because he travels from plant to plant as we need because he's very, very, very handy. And I travel, and our travels just hadn't met up. So finally, he was on a loader. I got to pull up. Just like 2 weeks, he'd been texting me, "Where are you going to be?" Because I thought he had shot deer. Uh-huh. I thought he had some wild game to give me. Instead, I got Rachel. So we met, and he goes, "Hey, I've got a friend."
You got a deer.
Yeah. He goes, "I've got a friend I've turned on to the podcast," and he told me, the qualifications of this friend. I was like, "Wow." Yeah, we need to. Do you think she'd be interested? And then I gave. Yeah, I told Larry, and then that's kind of how it all. So and then it's not Robert; it's Robert's wife that Rachel is friends with, and Robert too. But that's how that relates. So Rachel, how did you guys? We started talking about this before Larry started recording. How did you get onto this podcast?
Yeah, so one day I was texting my friend Michaela. We were just talking about life things, and she said, "Oh, by the way, Robert Foreman has a podcast and they have been interested in you coming on." And I was like, okay, well, give them my information. And so I went and listened to the podcast, really enjoyed the California Sober episode. And then next thing I know, I got an email from Larry.
So what about that? Because I mean, we know very little, obviously. Psilocybin is the only thing I know. That's the active ingredient in mushrooms. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's so. What was it about? I mean, was it just our lack of knowledge that pulled you in?
I got to straighten these idiots out.
Yeah, Jesus, he's got it. Well, of course we don't know that because our whole program is abstinence.
Right.
You know.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm going to go back. It hasn't been a couple months here. I mean, this how time flies. It was December 17th. I get this text from Rob. It says, Rachel Berry, PhD candidate, Palo Alto University. And then her information. And I'm like,
and that's Rachel. That's all I sent him. He's like, well, what the heck?
This is completely out of the blue. He just sends this to me. And I'm like, what? And then he types this long thing. And he goes, and I just wrote back, let's do it. And so I emailed you like right after that. So yeah, that's how it started. So yeah, so we got to talking about that, and obviously we don't know, right? And obviously the whole California Sober is something that we don't. Rob and I's opinions are the same, right? Well,
no, everybody's opinion is the same. You're not sober,
right?
I shouldn't say everybody. Not everybody's opinion. Our opinion is the same.
Well, Rachel, let's just ask you that. I mean, coming from
okay, now the California Sober is not.
No, I was going to ask her, what is your definition of sober?
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, well, before I dive into everything, I just want to add that my opinions and views and anything I say on the show is not a reflection of my employer. But to answer your question of what do I consider sober? I mean, personally, when I think of sober, I personally think more in the moment. Like, are you intoxicated right now? When I'm thinking of, somebody in recovery, I tend to use the word abstinent more personally. That being said, like the patients that I've worked with, they all are going to have their own definitions of sober. And for me as the clinician, my priority is more like what is going to lead to the least amount of dysfunction in this person's life. And so if their definition of sober is that they still use cannabis, but they're able to live their life within their values, then great. I'm going to use the same language with that patient that they use for themselves, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. That makes 100%.
Sounds like damage control.
Yeah. Yeah. Essentially, if you were to sum up my job in, an easy way, it's damage control.
Right. Right. So you working at the VA, do you see a lot, obviously you see a lot of people coming back in from combat?
Well, yes, I will say I do see a lot of folks who have experienced combat and have combat trauma. That being said, the demographics are usually folks who have been out of the military for a while. Mm-hmm. I've only had a few veterans who were like very fresh out of combat or very fresh out of the military.
Okay. And I want to say thank you for being a veteran and having worked with some of my brothers in the, sponsored some of them. Thank you for that. Cause there's not a lot of help for us. It doesn't seem.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for saying that. Thank you for your service.
Yeah. If you knew him, he wouldn't thank you very much. It's okay. I do think you know, Rob. I bust his balls, but one of the things that really struck me, and I'm probably going to refer to it a little bit, probably more than what I should, because it just was hit so fresh, is when Joe Rogan went on that podcast yesterday where they were talking about the FDA and getting approval for some of these, some of these approvals for some of these drugs that are what they call them, plant-based medicine is what they called it. Plant-based medicine. Do you have much experience with plant-based medicine?
Like working clinically or working with folks who use it?
let's just start with clinically.
Well, wouldn't psilocybin, which is comes from mushrooms, wouldn't that be a plant-based medicine, Rachel?
Yeah, absolutely. So because none of these are legal at the moment, I have not worked clinically with psychedelics of any kind. The only one that is in use right now is ketamine. That being said, I've had many patients who use psychedelics. I have had some patients who have gone through the ketamine treatment. So
now, what is ketamine? What is it derived from, Rachel?
So ketamine is a little bit of an atypical psychedelic. It hits more on the NMDA receptor system rather than the serotonin system. Ketamine is both kind of a dissociative and a hallucinogenic. So it's not one of the classic ones, but it is one of the only ones that is being medically used outside of clinical trials.
And why do you think that is? Is it safer? Why would they okay that one and not?
It has demonstrated more efficacy at this point for depression and for suicidality, especially.
Oh, really?
So that one's been around for, I don't know if I'd say a while, because, I've only been in the field so long, but as long as I've been in the field.
Longer than me and Rob.
Yeah.
We studied our drug in a different way. We used it. Rob, you look stumped.
No, I'm just writing notes down.
Yeah. One of the things, and you said this, once again, I apologize that I'm going to go back to this, but one of the things that Brian Hubbard said is, and he was such the way he spoke was so, when you first look at him, you think there's no way that this guy can speak that eloquently, but my gosh, this guy could speak. Here's one of the things: the human body's natural physical capacity to produce dopamine at its maximum, as measured in what's called nanograms per deciliter, is
same as testosterone.
Yeah, is a 125 nanograms per deciliter. Opioids produce a dopamine response of 925 nanograms per deciliter.
Wonder why we like it.
Exceeded only by meth, which produces a dopamine response of 1,100 nanograms per deciliter. That's incredible.
You wonder why it's so addictive.
When I read that this morning, I'm like, wow, here's another one. Ibogaine has a unique ability to restore the brain's dopamine and serotonin production to its pre-opioid exposure levels within 36 to 48 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. Somewhere in there it says it takes an addict when they get off, it takes up to 18 months for their dopamine and serotonin levels
to balance out,
to get back to normal.
Right.
One dose of the Ibogaine.
Okay, now what type of is that? Any hours. Addict alcohol, or is that an alcoholic? Is that a drug addict? Is that a heroin addict? Is that a meth addict? Which is that? Rachel? Are they one of the same? Does it do the same thing to the brain?
Say that again. So you're asking if, regardless of the drug, what?
Well, Larry said it takes about 18 months for the addict brain to get back to level itself out back to where it was.
Serotonin and dopamine. Yeah.
Okay, Is that a meth addict? Is that a heroin addict? Does it matter the drug? Do they all hit the same receptors? That 18 months, is that or is that a certain type of addict? Is that a meth addict who, you're going one way, where a heroin addict, he's going the other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. It's definitely going to vary by substance. Okay. I mean, comparing like meth to cannabis, for example, like there's going to be different times that it's going to take for that to go back. That being said, it's also going to depend on the person as well. But kind of the rule of thumb is that 90 days is kind of the rule of thumb for when things should start, coming clearer again.
I got you.
Right. One of the things, and going back to this only because, I want to continue to draw on Rachel for the.
Rachel, did you happen to listen to the podcast where we had Laurel on?
Mm-hmm. I don't think so.
Oh, I wish. Okay.
Yeah. So I was going to dig into a little bit of that. I'm going to get on to the depression side of this in a minute, but I want to, continue to go down this. The only reason why I want to continue to go down this is, listen, I'm not advocating for anything. And, it talks about it in our book, right? That, if science ever does, create a pill, would you ever want to go, would we ever want to go back to that? Right. I will never, ever go away from my AA, no matter if they ever bring a drug in, no matter ever what they do, only because of like I said, I'm going to get in the depression side of this in a minute, because I really want to dig on to Rachel with that part of it. But, but it's so the financial side of what our government is doing. And this is the part where Rachel's probably going to say, I'm going to keep my mouth shut on this, because I'm going to dig into a little bit of this, is the part of our federal government and the FDA, how they're suppressing this information, how they're keeping it away from letting us have. I mean, they have this in Mexico right now. They have it in Argentina, where it's completely legal, wherever they're able to go into. Well, because there is a side effect of this Igoban that is part of the heart, right? They have to regulate it. But it has to be administered.
Our government's not going to do it until they can financially benefit from it.
1,000%. And that's one of the things that Governor Perry talks about, right? Is it talks about how So do you have questions for her, right? Yeah. I mean, have you dug into any part of that? Is like what did you call it? The mushroom? Psilocybin.
The efficacy of that.
Do you know where that's at as far as bringing
besides trials, testing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so part of the reason none of these things are legalized yet, well, there's a lot that goes into it, but medically, there's a lot of research out there, and there's a lot of support for these things. But that being said, the research has not proven to be rigorous enough yet, and the evidence has not proven to be strong enough yet to fully legalize things for medicinal use. And part of the reason for that is just because of all of the regulations around these things. And, we could argue forever on how the culture contributes to the legalization of psychedelics and just drugs in general. But part of the reason that the research has not been rigorous is the limitations because of the legality. But there's also just some inherent difficulties when studying these substances that make it hard to produce rigorous research. So in research, the gold standard is randomized controlled trials, which is essentially, you have to demonstrate that the drug produced more of a benefit than if somebody got a placebo or didn't get the drug. And the problem with facilitating double-blind studies and ruling out that something is not a placebo effect when we're talking about psychedelics is that, if you give somebody a psychedelic, or if you give them something that's not a psychedelic and tell them it is, usually people can tell if they're under the influence of a psychedelic. It's not like an antidepressant where it may be a placebo, it may not be. And so that's been one of the challenges with studying psychedelics, is that we can't create, or it's very difficult to create these very rigorous, blind, randomized controlled trials.
Rachel, is there a lot of funding for this, or is funding also a factor?
Funding is absolutely a factor. I'm seeing that it's increasing over time. It seems like a lot of the universities, the VA system, they're starting to really get interested in this. And so more research seems to be going on. So it'll be interesting to see, what the future direction is. But I think that what is not often translated into the public is, while there definitely are concerns about, big pharma and capitalist aspect of all of this, the research we still need more research in this area before they're going to allow it to be
like human trials type stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, there are plenty of trials that have shown a lot of efficacy, but there's a lot of samples that are really small.
Right.
Again, there's not much ability to manage and figure out if there's placebo effect involved in this. And I think all the exceptionalism and cultural interest that's coming out also plays a role in that. Folks are becoming so excited about psychedelics that it's even more important to identify, like, are people just really excited about this, or is it just a placebo effect? So
well, because
it's complicated.
I know that Bill Wilson, the co-founder of AA, in the 50s and 60s, got kind of involved in LSD, and because he was trying to help bring about psychic change or spiritual awakening. He was trying to enhance or find different ways for that.
Yeah.
In the 50s and 60s.
Right. Yeah. And can you just define something for me? Only because I'm confused. When you say a placebo effect, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
So a placebo effect is essentially when we believe something is doing something for us,
okay.
But it's not.
Okay.
It's
you think you're getting one thing,
for us
right,
because
but they're giving you a water pill.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Like I said, I didn't know. So I wanted to ask. I mean, that's something I've never really thought.
Well, the mind is powerful. Well, the mind is a powerful healer. It's also a powerful destroyer. I mean, look what we did.
No more different than our alcohol. We thought it was making us bigger, faster, stronger. I did.
Well, right? and for a while, if it never worked for us,
right,
alcohol was our solution. At times, we could go talk to the girls. We could dance. We were looser. We felt comfortable in our own skin. For a while, it worked.
99,
and then it turns on you.
99% of the guys in AA, what do they always say? Well, I never felt like I fit in. That's why they started drinking.
It's a great social lubricant.
Yeah, it's for sure. And
the weird thing is,
I think that's why this psychedelic stuff is so interesting, because I'm so glad that I'm not in a position where I'm a lawmaker or have to decide on these things, because it really can go both ways. I mean, I think that there's some really promising research out there. I think that anecdotally, you talk to a lot of people who have had some really significant experiences. And then that being said, I mean, being around drug users, we all know folks who have used these substances and nothing about their lives have changed. And, they're still making bad decisions. And working in the hospital, I've seen plenty of folks come into the inpatient unit having some distressing experiences with these. And I've definitely had patients who've been misusing psychedelics. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And I'm really interested in science uncovering more about the mechanisms of action and how come these things can be so beneficial for some and not others. But I'm really glad that I'm not in like a lawmaker position, because it's complicated.
That's actually led right into my next question, is where I kind of wanted to go with that. I mean, somebody like you that's been inside the clinics, you've worked with these people. If you had your dream of, this is how I know we can fix somebody, I know how I can take this person that's so strung out on drugs.
Or how would you like to do it?
Yeah, that's where I'm going, Rob, is like, what would be how would you say, this is where, in my opinion, obviously it's your opinion, is this is what I feel is the best avenue to take an addict, alcoholic, or somebody. What would be your best solution to that?
After this, I'm going to give her a real-time solution.
We don't care, Rob.
A real-time question.
Shut up, Rob. Let her answer the question. I don't want to repeat it because I won't remember it.
She got it.
So, as somebody in the psychology field, we have recognized, as somebody in the psychology field, my MOS is therapy, right? What kind of therapy is debated? We know that cognitive behavioral therapies specifically have shown a lot of efficacy with folks with substance use disorders, which makes a ton of sense. It's very behavioral. That being said, my theoretical orientation is very interpersonal, very, very interpersonal, very relational. And I've found working with folks with addiction that often a lot of issues do stem from interpersonal dynamics that they've experienced.
Like home life?
Say again?
Like
yeah,
home life? Okay.
Like nature and nurture,
like
that kind of thing?
home life, different traumas. People have been bullied.
Okay.
On the flip side of that, when you fall into your substance use disorder, it can create tough interpersonal dynamics. You may experience more conflict with your friends and family. I have worked with a lot of folks who have been homeless or faced legal issues, and that creates a lot of social exclusion. So for me and the more severely dysfunctional populations that I've worked with, I see a lot of social exclusion. And so to answer your question, like, while I think the evidence-based CBT stuff is beneficial and important, and it's great to teach people the skills, I also personally take a more interpersonal approach when I'm working with patients.
That's a great answer. Great answer. Now, what were you going to say?
Well, I got 3 questions, but
well, hit it.
Yeah.
So the first question is easy. With methamphetamines, when a person's on methamphetamines and they say they get off the drug, what is the crash when they sleep for 3 or 4 days? What causes that in the brain? What is it in the brain that's going on?
Oh, are you talking about like the withdrawal?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, essentially when your dopamine has been functioning at a specific level for a period of time, and that's kind of become what's creating your motivation, we can really think about dopamine as motivation.
Okay.
And then you're no longer feeding that to your brain, and the dopamine levels are depleted. That's why people lack motivation essentially and feel really sluggish, really fatigued, really sick at times.
I got you. Now, when you talk about homelessness, here's my second question.
Mm-hmm.
How many that you met, their drug and alcohol addiction led to their homelessness? Because of their drug and alcohol addiction, they became homeless. And how many, through circumstances, bad luck, what have you, became homeless and then turned to drugs and alcohol? What?
That's a good question. It's kind of hard to quantify, but there's definitely been a mix there, I'd say. I think often, especially with veterans, like trauma seems to be more mixed into that. And sometimes you see folks whose substance use has, totally led to this. Other times it's the other way around. I'm also in Nevada, so we see gambling as
that's the non-drug that's the non-drug right? The non-drug addictions that you were talking about.
Yeah. So I'm interested in non-drug addictions such as gambling. But when what's the similarities in?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. One I've been really getting interested in, especially as you can see, I'm a Gen Zer. I'm really interested in like the literature on smartphone addiction and all that.
I got a subject for you. She lives downstairs.
No, that's real.
My wife. Oh, I know. I live with one. Sorry, Katie.
But what were you going to ask?
Let's take. I got. There's another. I still got one more question to go, but gambling addiction, right? Mm-hmm. Drug addiction. What are the similarities? What are the physical similarities? The brain, the endorphins, all that stuff. What takes place? Yeah. What are the similarities between those and differences between those addictions?
Yeah. So I mean, there's arguments in the literature, but many folks in the addictions field have argued against us classifying different addictions like substance use addiction, gambling addiction, sex addiction.
Why do they argue?
Say again?
Why do they argue? Some people don't think they're similar. There's no similarities, and some people think they're all the same.
Well, because there's underlying brain processes. It's really just our motivational system. It's really just our reward system being hijacked in a way. And that's pretty similar across all of these addictions. you know, whether it's somebody who's addicted to substances, whether it's somebody who's addicted to gambling or smartphones, or even, you know, those random cases where people get addicted to really strange off the wall stuff. Like something is being hijacked in the reward system. And so there are arguments in the literature that addiction should just be classified as an addiction process, more like a single disorder. But, you know, when it comes down to it, it just depends on how we want to categorize.
But if
things.
you do that, if you lump them all in, then that would be that. Then the argument would be then the same solution should fix them all. If they're
right.
all so I can't see broad brushing every addiction. Then the solution should be broad brushed into one. It's all the same. Then one treatment, and we know that's not the truth.
Well, I have questions about that when we're talking about psychedelics. Like if psychedelics are supporting with these substance use addictions, then my question is, well, how do they affect these other behavioral addictions?
That's my question too. Treating one,
and if
one
they
drug
don't,
addiction
then
with
we might be
another
looking
drug.
at something else.
Yeah, and that's what Rob was. I think that's what Rob's getting at is, you know, if we're just gonna treat one addiction with another one, we're not getting down to the root of the problem, right?
Mhm.
We're not. Is that what you're getting at, Rob?
Right. That's been my question, kind of. Because I'm going to give her eventually a case study.
You're talking with your fucking hands over there, and she can't see you.
I'm sorry.
Good God.
I'm Portuguese. Hands go.
If you could see him over here, you would think.
I'm excited. I love having Ron. This is like my favorite.
He's talking sign language across.
Well, and it ties me into what Laurel, because I was hoping when Laurel came on, who had been through depression and medicated, and she, and in her own, because she saw doctor after doctor, in her estimation, Rachel, I don't know if this is yours, the young lady that was on here, Larry's great friend, really eye-opening. She felt that they were just, the first thing they like to throw drugs at the problem first, too soon. A lot of doctors do, you know, and now that she's been off 10 years off of, you know, she's been off of depression medicine and feels better. She felt that the medication, it allowed her to function in the world, but she was just numb.
But and she had to deal, and this, I think this is where Rob's going. She had to deal. She had to get down to the root and the problem, just like our book tells us.
But then again, there are times where medication is needed,
necessary.
You know, and how to splice that up is, I guess that's where, you know, that's where the rubber meets. That's where the rub is.
That's where the PhD comes in.
Correct.
That's where you and I don't fit in, Rob. Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Rachel.
Oh, I was just going to say, well, you know, as an almost psychologist, my bias, well, I'm going to come from it with a bias. I'm not a psychiatrist, so I don't prescribe medication. And that's because I do believe that we don't have to solve every problem with medication. As somebody who provides therapy, I absolutely think that therapy can help. That being said, I also think that people can solve their problems and function in the world without therapy at times. I'm not a firm believer that, you know, every human problem needs treatment slapped onto it. Though these things can
say
be
that again,
effective.
Rachel. Say that again.
Well, I'm not a firm believer that every human problem needs some kind of treatment slapped onto it.
I love that. Thank you.
Wow.
I mean, you folks in AA, I'm not sure if either of you ever saw therapists or anything like that, but, you know, AA is not a medical, it's not considered like a medical treatment, and yet it helps so many people.
Yes, it does.
Right. So healing can come in so many different ways, and it's up to people what they, I don't know, what aligns.
Those are big words right there. What you just said was huge.
And a lot of doctors don't share that view.
Right.
Which so thank you for that.
Yeah. That is, and it really stems back to, I got two things, and I'm going to wrap up this part of it and move on, because I really want to talk with Rachel about the depression side of this a little bit. Rachel, you okay with that? But I want to ask a couple more. One quick question is, maybe you can't sum this up, but I get this all the time, the California sober thing, right? Especially since my and that's the reason why I had you define that in the very beginning, right?
Mhm.
Do you, and in your medical opinion, right, we know that is, if somebody's coming off of 15, 20-year addiction of alcohol, right, and they finally kick that, but they still have that anxiety, they didn't deal with the root problem, so they're still dealing with other stuff. So they decide to start smoking weed or taking gummies or doing something like that. Do you consider that person sober?
It depends. I think it really depends on the person and what the impact is on their life.
But you fucked up the question, in my opinion.
Then say it.
You said, okay, this person, they're coming off a 20-year alcoholic.
Okay.
They're alcoholic for 20 years.
Okay.
Then they didn't get down to the root problem. She already caught on to that. If they didn't get down to the root problem, all they're doing is medicating that problem with something else. So that's I think you loaded the question.
How do you think I loaded it?
Because you said, but they didn't get down to the root problem, Rachel, and then they turned to something else. She's going to tell you, well, they didn't get down to the root problem, right? So you loaded the question, kind of.
Right. So in our opinion, they're not sober. Right.
Right.
That's just the way Rob and I look at it. And it's, you know what?
But then again, if you're, I bet you what Rachel might say is, Rachel, if they're not out breaking into banks and knocking over drugstores, or they're not a harm to society, well, then it's harm reduction, kind of. If they're still not.
I mean, so as a mental health provider, like we categorize these things based on diagnoses. And so when I'm looking at the person, I'm saying, do they meet the criteria for a substance use disorder as defined by the, Bible of psychology, the DSM?
You guys have a Bible, a psychology Bible?
Yeah,
like
it's our big book for psychology. And, we can make a lot of arguments for and against the DSM. But yeah, so when I'm treating these things, I'm coming from that lens and looking at, does this person meet the criteria for a substance use disorder? So if the person is using cannabis all the time, they don't have functional impairment in their life, like you said, Rob. They're not, financially struggling. They're not ending up in jail. Then they may not meet the criteria for a cannabis use disorder or a substance use disorder.
Right.
Yeah.
If that person wants to call themselves sober or not, for me, it's like, it's not up for me to decide. I'm just there to make sure that they're not, I'm doing the damage control, right? And so for some, if, like you mentioned, Rob, with harm reduction, for some, if calling themselves sober and putting that label on themselves is what's going to keep them from shaming themselves, is what's going to keep them from doing more harm to their life, then great, fine, so be it. For other folks, having that really rigid definition of sober creates a boundary for them to continue to stay within their values.
Right.
So it's really just going to depend on the person. And that's why as a provider, like, we have to be very flexible with who we see and come from their frame of reference and use their language because every person is going to be different. And I found, especially in the addictions field, that, trying to force our ways of thinking about abstinence and sobriety on folks just doesn't always work. One thing that you'll really see this with when engaged in clinical treatment is we teach folks about lapse versus relapse, which I know is not common in the AA world.
Define that, please.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you the same thing.
Yeah. So we teach folks about lapse versus relapse. And essentially, it's a harm reduction thing. We come at it from this approach that many people do end up using again.
So that you would call that a lapse, like a lapse in judgment, kind of?
So we call a lapse say somebody has been sober for a long time, they've been sober for a long time. They go to like a wedding and they end up taking a drink of champagne. And then they go, oh, I'm never doing that again. I'm staying on my sobriety train. We would call that a lapse. There were no consequences. There was, they didn't spiral back into their old patterns. However, if somebody took that drink of champagne and then they have the thought process of like, I messed up, I may as well just keep going. Now I'm going to go
that's
home.
That's definitely alcohol thinking.
The fuck it.
The fuck it.
Yeah.
Or the phenomenon of craving took over, and they went.
Watch Rachel. I'm gonna light Rob's. I'm gonna light Rob's flame here. Watch it.
But she already
that little slip of champagne. Yeah. They call it a slip.
Ain't no fucking slip. There's no banana. There's not a slip. There's no banana peel under their foot. That's a drink. That's a conscious decision. That's a drink. No slip.
Yeah.
And again, I don't even like the word relapse.
Yeah, sorry, Rachel. I told you I was going to light his fuse. So, what do you mean you don't like a relapse?
I'm a cancer survivor, right?
Right.
No, you can relapse. When cancer comes back, that word relapse. It's a drink. I think it's just it's a pillow under someone's ass, in my opinion. I relapsed again. I had a relapse. No, you had a drink. You had made a conscious decision, and you went and had a drink.
Right.
Don't.
Yeah,
I don't like to soft soap it sometimes, but I get it's a medical term.
Yeah, that's actually another thing. The field actually has been shifting away from the term relapse and
beautiful
now using the term return to use.
Yeah.
Which is what it is.
There's different opinions on that. But
what's your opinion, Rachel? That's all I care about.
Like I said, I use the languages that my patients use. A lot of them use the language relapse. Sometimes I think the field tries really hard to get fancy with terminology, and it's not actually what our patients use. And so I just try to use the language that I'm seeing used by them, how they identify. And so like I was saying with the lapse versus a relapse, the reason we teach that is because if folks take that sip of champagne and then they feel shame, they may spiral back into their addiction. Whereas if they have this concept of, okay, this can just be a lapse, this doesn't have to be the end of it all. The hope is that then stops that addiction process and they can continue on. That being said, I know many folks who go to AA that's a no. You have that sip of champagne, you've just broken your sobriety. And for many folks, they need that structure. Right. They need that strictness. They need that boundary. So it's really just going to depend. Sometimes that structure and that strictness can lead to shame for some folks. For other folks, it can really keep them in line. And so it's really individualized.
Well, it is. And when you talked about someone's own, their definition of what they define themselves as sober, like the people that you work with, they quit drinking and they picked up marijuana. And so they're still going to work and doing all that stuff. That may work for them. And they say they're sober, but for and the reason in the context of Alcoholics Anonymous, or when they're in the rooms, well, I'm sober, California, whatever you want to call it. And that's their definition for them. But for the next, that's good for them. But to go share that, the next person, that might kill them eventually. So totally. That's where, that's where that's where the rub is for me.
Right.
Yeah, totally. I think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I know plenty of people who have gotten sober or remained abstinent from things like fentanyl or methamphetamine, but, they still drink casually, socially, and that's okay, fine with them. But I can also see how, and I've experienced in my patient groups that folks who've been able to do those things, when speaking up about those experiences, it can produce a lot of anxiety for other folks who can't handle any kind of polysubstance use. So it's really complicated, and I can see why for AA to work, it does have to adhere by these really strict boundaries. But AA also doesn't work for everybody. And so that's why we try to be flexible with treatment.
Yeah. I got a nephew that he recovery for drugs and alcohol, for drugs big time. And he's like 14 years off of methamphetamine, but he controls his drinking. No problem.
He's not an alcoholic.
No, he's not an alcoholic. He was, like I said, he went through rehab and everything.
I did drugs for a lot of years. Right. It was fun. But when it came time to stop, I stopped.
But drugs. We were alcoholics.
But the drinking, but my drinking wasn't as heavy then. And then it became, I don't know if I switched. I mean, I still drank, but.
I was the same way with food.
But I tried to stop it. It killed me.
I mean,
almost.
This can be an interesting question, Rachel, because I don't think I've ever asked this. I mean, I had gastric bypass in 2007, and my wife's convinced that's when my alcoholism.
Dude, and I remember
really
when we
took
had Mary
off.
on,
Right.
I asked that question to Mary because even though she wasn't I've seen in the rooms, it was mostly women, but there was like 3 men, but mostly women. When they've had that surgery, their drinking just took off.
Do you see that a lot, Rachel?
That's interesting.
I mean, there's a connection
have no idea,
somehow.
but I'm super interested in going and researching that more. That is very
okay, Rachel. Now,
interesting.
Mary said her opinion was, because she had it, was that they took their eating addiction or their comfort they got from eating. Since they couldn't eat, they drank a little bit, and then the alcohol.
See, and I didn't look at it that way, and I'm.
But I don't. But I think there's something. There's a physiology
I
going
think
on
there's
here.
something chemical there. My
do
personal
too.
opinion.
I do
there's
too.
something chemical
Because there are so many in the rooms of AA that they weren't even heavy drinkers or drinkers at all. Right. Mostly women who had gastric bypass, and then boom, they're in the rooms.
Right.
And there's something there.
I was a drinker. I was 405 pounds.
There's your PhD thesis.
Yeah. I was a drinker, but not a heavy drinker. When I was 405 pounds, and I had gastric bypass July 3rd, 2007. And 6 months later, I took my first drink, and I still drink. You know, when they call this alcohol progressive, it's a very progressive. For me, it was extremely progressive over a period of about 30 years, right? Because I had that in 2007. About 25 years. In 2007, I had it. And, in 2022 is when I checked into rehab. So, I mean, it progressed over that period of time. And the last 3 years was the biggest one. And my wife still to this day says that she watched it progress after my gastric bypass.
I've heard it time and again. So there's something physical that goes on. It's not just a switching something from another. Because Mary's the one that kind of pointed that one part out for her. But there is something physical that goes on. Either tolerant, because there's some women, 3 of them at primary purpose, that didn't really drink at all.
Right.
Had gastric bypass. Then for some reason, I don't know which Rachel's going to figure out. We're going to, it's going to be awesome.
I'm going to go ahead and switch that, Rachel, because that's kind of lead into where I want to go. So my drinking, I had the gastric bypass in 2007, and I was with a company. I stayed with them 15 years. I went and I was involved as a partner with another company. That partnership didn't go out. Sorry. I sold back out to he still owns it, still doing very well. And then I went to work for another company, then went to work as a general manager running a company. And then that's when my alcohol really got out. But looking back now, my depression from the time I left my original company, and I say this a lot, and I'm going to go on just a short monologue for a minute because I want to get your opinion on something, because I know a lot of people have asked me about this. I look at this as, over a period of about 15 years, somebody kept turning the lights off in my brain one lume at a time, right? One lume at a time. It just got a little dimmer,
darker.
little dimmer. And over that 15 years, my body and my mind adjusted to that darkness. And I didn't realize how deep into my depression I was going. When I got my help and I finally decided I was going to go to recovery, and about the day 20th, somewhere around in there, something was revealed to me that gave me a little bit of, and I say this all the time, if you've listened to the podcast a few times,
it reversed your darkness.
There was just a moment of something that reversed that darkness to where I could see that I was in a dark spot, right? It's almost like if you're in a dark room and somebody pokes a hole in the curtains and you can see that it's light outside, and you go,
well, it's like a needle.
Yeah. Just wait a minute. What was that? And I chased that light to when I finally got outside, and I finally looked outside. I'm like, what in the hell was I just, because I was just in such a deep darkness.
Isn't that like the frog in the water, in the boiling water? It just, you turn the pot, you turn it on, and he doesn't jump out because
doesn't
you don't
notice
realize
it's getting
so
hotter.
Progressive.
And I said this a long time ago. My brother can attest to this. I used to say that because when I was fat, I used to eat. I'd eat 7-Eleven hot dogs, 3 or 4.
You had to support that.
I would eat. My brother's like, you're going to die of a heart attack. And I used to tell him, by the time I die of a heart attack, they're going to be able to replace it. You'll be able to pull into 7-Eleven and get a new heart, right? That's kind of the way my brain would work, right? Because the same thing with me. So now broken hip. Hold on, let me finish this. Broken hip, replace it. Bad back, replace it. Bad finger, replace it. That in my brain.
Heart, they replace them too.
Yeah, I mean, in my brain, that's just how I thought. That's how I'm very mechanical. Just fix it. So when I when I first started getting this depression, I was just like, well, fix it. Why can't they just fix it? Until I got into the rooms of AA that I realized.
Well, you didn't know you were in that room until that light came on.
Right. But this is what I'm getting to. I didn't realize, and the question that I'm getting to, I didn't realize I needed that help until I saw that. And that mechanism inside, whatever it was that's in there, that turned, that I saw that I need help. I'm in a bad spot. Then I started thinking about the thoughts of suicide. I started thinking about all those things that, all this shit that I used to think about when I was inside that. I'm like, Jesus criminy, how did I get there? So my question is this: as a society, and we see that I think recognizing somebody with a depression is sort of easy to recognize.
Is it? I have a question about that.
To me, it is.
We have clinical depression, and I've seen people that come in that say that too. And once they get sober, many times they get off their benzodiazepines, they get off their medications, because they go to their doctor and they start. And they didn't. It was through their alcoholism,
right,
that brought this stuff on. I've seen more people get off medications, getting sober, because they were treating their alcoholism, or their doctors were, or whatever, with medications. I've seen people get off of them. What is the difference between someone who doesn't drink, doesn't use drugs, but are, I would say, clinically depressed? I don't know. What is the difference between alcohol and drug-induced depression and someone who doesn't have that, but yet has a physical or a chemical imbalance to bring on depression? Is there a difference? Rachel?
That's a good question. It would depend. Like, alcohol itself is a depressant, so obviously that can have depression-like effects. And then, somebody who's been going through withdrawal and their brain is still catching up and finding new ways to be happy may experience depression. It's very common. But
I did.
I'm not sure, like, neurologically, if there's any difference. I would imagine not so much.
Okay.
But I'm imagining this. Well, the symptoms are pretty similar. You're seeing that, like, loss of energy, the fatigue, anhedonia. Things aren't as interesting.
Say that word again.
Anhedonia. So like loss of pleasure in things.
Okay.
You're not.
Okay.
So the flowers aren't so bright. The sun isn't too shiny. You're just kind of dull.
Well.
Yeah. You might have shame. You might not. You might have a really hard time concentrating. So.
Okay, now let me ask you this, because you brought up shame a few times. When people defining their own sobriety, so they don't want to feel, or someone has a lapse, you can give them that term so they won't feel shame. Because now guilt and shame for me are two different. Because that was a big thing for me as I got in here. And when you hear people in the rooms of AA or NA, and I heard it, but when I was at the NA meeting the other day, I went and spoke, Rachel, where we got sober at Maynard's, and then I just stayed for a meeting, which just happened to be an NA meeting, Narcotics Anonymous. And that word was brought up a lot, but it's always brought up in conjunction with guilt, shame. And for me, there's a difference. Guilt is, I did bad. Shame is, I am bad. One, I can do something about, right? Guilt, I can do something. I can make amends. I can, shame, if I am, or guilt is, I did something bad. Shame, I am something bad. There's nothing, there's no, nothing I can fix with that one. That's where I had to get, and God doesn't make junk. So the I am something bad, that's got to be done with. Guilt, I can deal with. Shame, I understand, because that's why I had to differentiate those two terms, because I hear it in the rooms a lot. And I had to do that from my guys. Oh, okay, now, you're not junk. You are not something bad. You did something bad, and that's we can do something about that. We can try to remedy that. Being something bad, you can't remedy that. And if you stay there, that's where, I don't know if that helped, but guilt and shame are not the same thing. As far as
absolutely. This is something that we teach too. And the example you provided is kind of an example of how cognitive therapy works. It's from taking that I am bad to I did something that wasn't in line with my values, or I did something that didn't feel good or that I don't want to do again.
So you're saying I'm a therapist?
Creating a more flexible way of looking at these things.
God damn it, Rob. You're far from a therapist, brother.
Bull crap, right? Bull crap. We do a lot of therapy, you and I, when we work with men and when we work with these. I'm just trying to get more tools for her to help the next man that comes in.
No, and I get it. I mean, I give Rob a hard time, but what he does with men and how he does what he does is incredible to me. And now I'm going to be a real asshole here. Where I was going with my fucking question before you went on your tirade, dick. Because I always say that switch, right? When you
reverse the darkness,
when you can reverse that darkness, right? Do you see in the clinical side of things where that is possible, or is that different in each person?
That's what you're trying to, that was you, Rachel, isn't that what you're trying to elicit with your therapy, with maybe possible medications to get that person to switch?
Yeah, it's going to be very different in each person. I mean, for some folks, like we see like neurological disorders are going to cause depression. It's really
neurological disorders. Could you give us some names for those so people, what's the general?
Multiple sclerosis. Okay. People might present really depressed.
Okay.
So you see that, but then you also see folks who are feeling depressed after some kind of really significant event. Maybe they've lost their job. Maybe they're going through a divorce.
We just had a couple lost a son.
A death.
Yeah. They had to bury their son. So that's.
Yeah, that can make anybody depressed. And then, of course, as you guys talked about, coming off of substances with that withdrawal and with your brain, taking those 90 days or whatever to rejuvenate, do what it does, people might feel really depressed because of that lack of motivation, that lack of dopamine. And so it's going to look different for different people. And yes, like you said, Rob, kind of my job is to figure out what is it that's making that depression tick. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's going to look very different for different people, and likely it's going to be a combination of all the things.
Well, and like I said, I keep going back to, I'm a very mechanical person, right? Mechanical thought process. I know what flipped mine, right? I know what did, right? No, let me rephrase that. I don't know what did. I don't, right? But holy shit, if we could figure something out that just, for me.
Which is what Bill Wilson tried to do in the 50s and 60s. To try to bring about that.
But I'm not talking with medicine. I'm talking when I was shown, right?
But he was trying to bring about the spiritual awakening, which is what you had.
Exactly.
A psychic change.
That's where I was going.
Psychic change.
I had whatever happened with me, there was something that hit that spiritual change that I had inside of my brain.
For Rachel, they'll call it a psychic change, which is a personality change sufficient to overcome alcoholism.
Right. And that I saw that little light come poking through that darkness, and the heaviness that came off of me. That, and I think, and I say this quite often, and this is why I do this podcast. I can go back and talk about, Katie, my wife, even brought it up, right? Because the whole reason why I started this podcast is because I had a son, a very close, dear friend of mine lose his son to fentanyl. Mm-hmm. And because he was so strung out on what's the drug they used?
Librium?
No, the drug they get him off of.
It starts with an M.
Gosh darn it. Sir,
what do they get off of heroin, Rachel? When someone's on heroin, they give them
Suboxone.
Oh, I thought
Suboxone. Yeah. He was so strung out on Suboxone and he couldn't get any, so he went out on the street to get some and ends up getting some fentanyl, right?
Oh man.
Well, that's the whole reason why, the reason why I started this podcast, because he was so mad at himself that he couldn't figure out how to get through to his son, because he was doing everything for him, right? Everything for him.
And Larry's trying to explain addiction to his father, and
he just didn't get it. And I get so frustrated when I couldn't help him with that. And that's been my it's been my venture, my quest, I guess, is another way all along, is how can I help? How can I help? What can I do?
People with
I'm sober out loud.
With family members that are going through this. That's why this podcast, and that's why having you on, right? A beautiful side of it. The medical side, real medical side, a real doctor. To help. We just want to help the next person,
right?
Or the next family member whose son, daughter, wife, husband's going through this, and they're trying to understand them and just don't.
Right.
But that's the goal.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, I think that for me personally, there's a lot of factors that go into these things. Obviously, there's so many different reasons why people use or drink or engage in addictive behavior. And so many people experience recovery in different ways. My personal philosophy, and as I kind of hinted to when speaking about my treatment style, is that connection and our interpersonal relationships can be so healing. And I think that that's part of why AA works so well.
One alcoholic working with another, we've gained we already have their trust, because once you just one conversation, oh, this cat, he's chewed some of the same dirt that I have. He's been, that's why one alcoholic working with another works so great, because we gain that trust real fast, because we've been there.
I mean, and
how do you gain that, Rachel?
I think about spirituality. I think about connection as spirituality. I mean, you can feel, in my opinion, when I'm doing an addiction group and one group member is feeling really emotional, especially if it's a veteran, especially if it's a man who has all these beliefs about not showing emotions, we finally release them in front of everybody, and everybody gives this person support. Like, you can feel the emotion in the room. To me, that is what's spiritual. And I think that you can find that in individual therapy. You can find that in group therapy. You can find that in the walls of AA and NA. You can find that when you have a really great spouse or family who's willing to work you through it. I also think that that is part of why we're seeing people have this draw towards things like psychedelics, because to some degree, people report that they're really producing this sense of connection, this sense of union and universality. And so, I think regardless of what facilitates it, whether it's therapy or medicine or AA or something else, I think that often what is really helping people curb addiction outside of the behavioral stuff is this deep evoked emotional experience with other humans.
A sense of belonging, that you're not alone. Right. Because when you come into the rooms, how many people do you know that you don't know what I've been through? You don't know. And then and I've heard, then you start taking a man through his 4-step, then I lay out some of my 4-step to him. Oh, you understand exactly where I've been. You've been where I've been, but you're on the other side of something. How did you get there? Right. But that sense of belonging, that sense of community that we have with our men's group. Oh, for sure. How we hold each other accountable in love. Yep. We don't let anybody get away with no bullshit. Right. Because we love you. And you have that, but also when one brother's hurting, you've got 5 or 6 around him. Carrying the yoke. Yeah. Because a burden shared is a burden lightened. Right.
Rachel, in your therapy, and you said it, and I was going to ask this, you do group therapy.
Yeah, I do. Right now, actually, I think I have about 5 individual patients, but I primarily do groups every day.
Sorry, go ahead.
Right now I'm in a partial hospitalization program. So I'm working. So there's different levels of care for folks in addiction, and they're placed based on what we call the ASAM criteria. So if somebody has a pretty severe addiction, they might go to residential treatment, which, most folks know is rehab. And then the next step down would be partial hospitalization. So people are going all day, every day, but they get to go home at night. And then the next step down is intensive outpatient. So the program that I'm working within is 3 days a week, 3 hours a week. So I bounce between the IOP and the PHP programs. And then, of course, there's other treatment step downs, other groups, individual therapy, that kind of thing.
What's your results that you get from those group therapies compared to your one-on-one? Do you see a big difference, or is a lot of your one-on-ones in your group therapy?
So working within the VA, it's going to vary by setting that you're working in and the way things are structured. Working within the VA and the programs that I work with, the group therapy and the individual therapy are like adjunct to each other. Group therapy, especially with substance use disorders, really is considered like the primary treatment, and then the individual stuff is adjunct and added on top of it.
Yeah.
I do think to some degree, again, it really does depend on the patient. Some folks, they benefit greatly from groups. They don't really want to meet with their individual therapist as much, which, may or may not be avoidance, may or may not be something that they need to work on in
avoidance.
But you'll never know till you get them till you get them alone. But there, there's that safety in numbers kind of thing. They feel more protected in a group and that way, if I'm in a group, I'm still participating, but I'm not gonna let you know me, because I don't want to let you in it. There's a trust issue.
Yeah.
Totally. And I have been in this. I've been in this setting only for a few months now, but before I moved to Reno, I was working in a rehab. I was working in a residential treatment setting that was like either 3 months or 6 months, depending on.
So you got to actually see growth over,
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. And some folks, or a lot of folks, end up being like court mandated to come. So I've worked with a lot of people who are not necessarily there because they want to get sober or become abstinent. Yeah. And so
the nudge the nudge from the judge.
Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes like the groups can be really powerful there because after hearing other people speak, that can really change people's minds. But then other people will really check out during groups. They're just there to get their boxes checked. And that individual relationship that I'm able to form with them might be more motivating.
That's right.
So it really depends, but groups are really considered a core piece of treatment for addiction.
I think a lot of people, when they go into a group setting, I know for me, when I first got into rehab, when I sat in a group setting, I'm like, I'm not as bad as that guy. 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 I don't belong here. Right. I don't belong here because I didn't steal from them. I didn't rob them. I didn't do those.
You're looking at
things.
The differences, and not the
never got a
similarities.
DUI. I never lost my wife. I never did that. I never did that. I don't belong here. Right.
Yeah. Of course we don't want. Yeah. I don't want to be like that.
Until
take inventory.
Till I walked into an office building and saw the chairs turned around and Rachel, I'll tell you
tell her that story.
I'll tell you this story. And it was, one of my biggest character flaws or defects or whatever is I'm a control freak, right? I'm horrible. Ask Rob.
He's getting better. But he used to be terrible.
Oh my God. And in the rehab facility that I went to, and our poor listeners have heard this story so many times, but I want Rachel to give me an assessment here in a second. I went to when I first went into rehab, I was 3 or 4 days on Librium, which they were trying to get me off of. And then when I got off of that, another 2 or 3 days to clear my head off of that. So about 6 days into it, I'm sober, right? I'm sober. I'm good. I can do this now.
He's telling them how to run their program and they're doing everything wrong.
Right. And then that hadn't gone on yet.
Okay.
Right. At this point, I'm talking to my sister trying to figure out how the hell I can get out and just go home. Right.
Because you're good.
I'm good. I'm sober. I got my shit together. Right. I'm good to go. And then when I finally came to realization, no, I better stay here, live this out, talk to my wife and my kids and no, I'm going to stay here, give it out. So at that point, I said, okay, I'm going to hang out. But then that's when I decided I was going to teach them how to run that place because I'm a control freak. I'm going to teach them how to do everything. So not only did I go through one counselor, I went through 3 counselors, right? Because they kept saying, I'm not dealing with this guy anymore. I'm not dealing with this guy anymore. Finally, they gave me over to a guy that was the head counselor.
And now when he says control freak, Rachel, means he's an asshole too.
Oh, complete.
He's not going to give you constructive criticism. He's just going to tell you you're fucked up and this is what you're doing.
You're all a bunch of idiots and you're doing this wrong. In fact, the last meeting I went to, the owner of the facility had to come in. This is why I'm still very close with her today. The owner of the facility had to come in and they put me on with another counselor. This counselor was actually the teacher of all of our groups. I didn't realize he was a counselor. And so the first assessment meeting was about 25, 30 minutes. The second time I come into his little office, he had all the chairs turned around backwards in his office, right? And it's a little office. And I go walking in there and I start turning the chairs back around and putting them where they're supposed to be. And he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm just fixing the chairs. He goes, nobody told you to do that. It's none of your business. Sit down. And I'm like, I was just fixing the chair. Nobody told you to fix those. Sit down. You have nothing to do with them. Rachel, I looked at him. I'm like, who in the fuck do you think you're talking to? That was my thought process in my head. I'm like, who? You're just a stinking who you think? I mean, in my mind, I'm just angry, right? Like, who's this guy? And I sat down.
And when did you also think, I'm just trying to fix the office?
And I did. I told him I was just trying to fix this. And I'm like, then I sit down and then he starts talking about my character flaws and my controlling. And I'm like, holy fuck. And that's when the light came on inside of me going, and then I broke down. I did. I'm an asshole. I'm a no good, rotten son of a bitch.
That's shame, but that's wrong.
Right. And you know what? And it took me a while to get to that. When we talk about the 90 days before,
right.
You know, it's funny that even got brought up because it was about 90 days when I was
There's
told
a reason
to stop
you get 30, 60, 90-day chips. There's a reason they do that.
It was about 90 days is when I finally was told, Larry, stop taking yourself so damn serious. And that was the other.
Rule 64.
Right? 62, dummy.
Rule 64, buddy.
62.
Is it?
You want to fix yourself now, prick?
No, I'm good.
You want me to grab the book?
Go ahead. I got a question yet. So yeah.
It was about 90 days in is when I heard a girl in the back of the room that says she heard herself laugh for the first time. Right. And, you know, and that flipped me again to where, oh my God. Right. That's when I started getting that pink cloud coming into me. You know, people talk about that pink cloud coming on and off. That pink cloud is I do everything I can to keep my alcohol is no longer, you know, we talk about this all the time. I don't think about alcohol anymore than I think about breathing. I get that from my sponsor, my friend Rob. And I don't.
Page 64, buddy. It was not our problem.
No. So I don't think about that. What I do like and what keeps me is my peace and my serenity. There is zero. Sorry.
He's getting emotional here.
Yeah.
He does. I love it.
Because of the misery that I had of fighting myself, fighting the miserable son of a bitch that I had become, that I was fighting that. And I was trying to calm that with the alcohol. I was trying to get that suppressed inside of me. I couldn't get it. And when I finally got that peace and that serenity, that alcohol was never my problem, right? I had to get rid of that piece of that, what I had become.
We had to get down to causes and conditions.
Right. So I don't even know where I was going with that. That I don't even know where I got started down that.
We were just telling her about the flipping of the darkness with Chris and the control issues and how it just switched for you. I got down that road. But I have a question, for her, because there's normal, I won't say normal, but most people get into this profession where she's going for a certain reason. What was your motivation, Rachel, to get into this line of work? Because you were obviously, you're so far into it now that you're going to see successes and because you get into, you talk about relationships and because you got to gain their trust as a therapist. That's what we do through our alcohol, through the same similar lifestyles, our alcoholism, but you are going to, and already you're going to see success. You are also going to see heartbreaking failure. Right. I mean, things are just going to tear you apart just down to your soul. What got you in? What drove you to this profession? Great question. Was it a family member? Was it just wanting to help people? What was it?
Yeah. So I have known I wanted to be a psychologist since I was 12 years old.
Wow. Why? What at 12 years old?
She's going there.
No, I didn't know.
So, a family member who was very close to me, had a psychotic break, and it was really a difficult time in my life. And it also made me very fascinated and curious, kind of realizing like that was a moment I realized everybody does not experience the world the same. Reality is very subjective. Yep. And so I started getting really into psychology, reading a lot of books about psychology, and
at 12 years old,
my path was on. I started interning in the mental health field in high school, went to college and, did the whole ordeal. But my original plan had always been to work with folks with schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders, which is still a big part of my career. However, as a college student, a college student who grew up in Calaveras County, I was also surrounded by a lot of peers who engaged in substance use, and some really struggled and others didn't. And I was really curious why some did and others didn't. I also got really interested into the psychedelic stuff around that point. And then I had a great professor in one of my undergraduate courses. It was a psychopharmacology class, and I was really interested in psychopharmacology. And that led to this interest in addiction and into psychedelics and really just like drugs and, these behavioral processes in the brain in general. So when I got to graduate school, my research interests really shifted towards the addiction and harm reduction and psychedelic angle. But clinically, I've still continued to work with folks with serious mental illness, as well as folks with addiction and trauma. Ended up working with veterans. So you see a whole host of all of those things mixed together there. Found that I really enjoyed working specifically with folks experiencing homelessness. So that's kind of how I've gotten to this point. I really love working with the patients who others may consider very complex and who have a lot of overlapping problems. I really like working with folks who've been socially excluded, either from living on the streets or either from living on the streets or, being in prison and jail. So just one thing kind of led to the next, and I found out that this is where I like to be. Wow.
Because I wrote Laurel on here, that young lady that you was Larry's friend. When she was in high school, her father was an alcoholic, and she wanted to learn more about it. So she studied and did a paper on alcoholism, and then you at 12, had your family member go through something, and then you just dove right in. That's awesome.
We have a couple guys that we know through AA. They got sober at 7. One got sober at 17. He's been involved in AA since 17. And I think what just baffles me, once again, we say this, that everybody is different, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. At 12 years old, I was trying to figure out where I was going to go duck hunting, where I was going to go. I mean, that was not even, thinking about somebody else's mental health was not even remotely close to a thought process for me. So, and then as Rob said, he brings up Laurel, who at a very young age,
she was 17.
17, she brings up a bar that she's never going to do these things, right? Never going to do this, never going to do this, never going to do this.
But she wanted to understand her father and his alcoholism. So she studied it, did a paper on it.
Yes. For school, she did a paper on alcoholism. And I'm like, at 17 years old, I was already an alcoholic, right? I mean, I was in high school, but I was guarantee you I was already an alcoholic. Last thing I was going to do was study it because I didn't want to stop it. It's fascinating how,
Okay, can I ask that, Rachel, at 12 years old, that family member that was having that traumatic, where did they go for help? What kind of help did they get? Did they go see a psychologist? What was the end result?
I don't want to speak too much on it just to protect this person's
did they go seek professional help though?
So to say,
just said she doesn't want to talk about it.
I just want to make sure I'm, protecting this person's privacy. And also at 12 years old, I fully wasn't involved in the process. Right. So I truthfully don't know all. I will say that things are going great with this person.
Thank you.
And this is one situation where medication really helped this person. And so when I go back and forth between, the medication debate in my own head, it's like, we do see folks with these really severe mental health disorders that benefit from medication. Right. But then we also see folks where medication is totally ruining their life, or drugs are totally ruining their life. And this is making me think of something interesting that comes up in working in addiction treatment. When you're working in a setting that has a really diverse population and you're doing group therapy, one of the things that can be tough with group therapy is it's not as individualized. And I've had times where, the group is talking about how important it is to be abstinent and to be sober. And, you don't need drugs to make everything okay. Meanwhile, we're trying to convince one of the patients in the group to get on medication because they can't stop hallucinating. And so, sorry, just what you said made me think about that. And
because one size doesn't fit all.
Flexibly about these things. Yeah, say it again.
One size doesn't fit all.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always a double-edged sword. It's very hard for me to have a very strong, firm position about a lot of these things because I can see both ends of the spectrum. And like I said, I'm grateful that I'm not a lawmaker or a judge because.
But Rachel, even into that case, but you are going to be a physician. You're going to be treating people, and you're going to have the power to prescribe or not prescribe. I do not envy that position at all. I'm glad I don't have that.
I won't have the power to prescribe.
Oh, you won't?
Yeah, no. So as an almost psychologist, once I'm a psychologist, we do not prescribe. There are some states, if you go on to get additional training, you can become a prescriber. There's like 3 of them. So it's very rare, but as psychologists, we do not prescribe medication typically. So again, that's one of the things where I'm like, cool, I don't have to worry or ask myself about these. I get to just stick with the more fundamental, developmental, and personal things.
I went through probably 4 psychologists, but I don't think they were doctors. They were LCFHs. They weren't actual. Yeah,
those are master's level clinicians. Right. So you might be thinking of a licensed marriage and family therapist.
That's what I went to.
Professional counselor. Yeah. So their schooling looks very different than ours.
Yeah, and I think that's where I want to be very careful because I went through, because I knew at some point I was dealing with depression. Even Katie knew, right? I mean, I was seeing a psychologist and a psychiatrist at the same time.
Which, I mean, Rachel, let me ask you, with Larry's depression, was it alcohol induced? I mean, can you treat the depression without dealing with the alcohol, the underlying alcoholism?
That is a wonderful question that is hotly debated.
Well, tell me
in the literature.
We have you on. What is your opinion on that?
I can answer it.
Well, but
okay.
Now, Rachel, what is the hot debate, and then where do you stand?
Well, so the hot debate is, if you're going to give somebody treatment for depression, for trauma, for schizophrenia, for any other diagnosis, do they need to be sober first? And some people lean towards yes, they need to be sober first, and then we'll treat this other thing. Sometimes people believe, no, it's likely that the mental illness is fueling the substance use disorder. We'll treat the mental illness first. Oftentimes, the reality is that both things need to be treated together. But, I'm actually preparing upon graduation to work primarily with homeless veterans. And so looking at that literature, they really recommend that sobriety is not it's not an inclusion for treatment. Like, people should be able to get treatment even if they are on substances, because they may never stop if, they may never be willing to give up substances, especially if there's somebody who's like living on the street. And so we try to treat what we can. My personal philosophy is I'm really patient-centered, and I really believe in patient autonomy. And so if somebody shows up and they're like, I don't want to get sober, I'm going to be honest with them how substance use is going to affect their mental health. But if that's what they want to try, then we try it out. That might look different for folks who are court mandated, but I generally try to take that same approach.
So when I said I can answer that myself, I can tell you there was no way I was going to get rid of my depression until I got rid of my alcohol. Here's why I know. Let me rephrase that. So I was seeing a psychologist and a psychiatrist at the same time, right? Because in my state of mind where I was at.
Were you being totally honest with both of them about your drinking and stuff?
Fuck no.
Okay. It's hard for them to help you.
Yeah.
If they don't know.
That's that's where I was getting to my point. So I was going between the two of them, and I went through probably at least 5 or 6 different antidepressants, right? Mm-hmm. Way different, right? In fact, one of the last ones they put me on. What
would they do to you, Larry? I mean, as far as, what do you mean difference?
Not a fucking thing, because I was drinking so much. It wasn't that, never even gave them a chance, right? Never even gave them an opportunity to work, right?
And there's interactions between antidepressants and alcohol.
Oh, the last one I was on, Rachel, I would get the shakes so bad, right? Here, and this is going to go back to show you my alcoholism. I would get the shakes and it would intensify my withdrawals of my alcohol is what I'm saying that. Because if I didn't have, because I was a 24-hour a day drinker. Right?
Towards the end, yeah, okay.
Towards the last 6 months, I was a 24-hour.
Is this when you were seeing these people too?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Towards the end, I had to have, I didn't, my body had to, right? In order to get the trimmers and the DTs, I had to maintain a certain amount of alcohol in my system. But that last antidepressant, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it, but that last one, my withdrawals would come on so much harder and so much faster. My shakes, I would literally have to pour alcohol into a rag to drink it, to suck it out, because I would shake so bad I couldn't get the alcohol.
Now, how much would you have to get in before that would slow down?
Probably a good solid drink, like a shot.
Okay.
I could get in me and let it settle in me.
That would settle you down enough to where your hands would stay.
And then when I stopped taking those, and I was blaming it on those, but I think at that point my alcohol was just so bad. My body was just craving it that bad. Right. But yeah, I bet I went through 5 or 6, 7 different antidepressants that they tried to put me on, and Xanax, and Jesus Christ, the amount of shit I tried to get inside my body to calm those. That
the alcohol wasn't fixing anymore.
The alcohol just stopped working because it just gotten so bad that, Rachel, and I could literally sit here and talk for hours, right? I could, and so I'm going to start shutting this down. I want to know, will you come back with us? Say
absolutely.
Yeah, I want to make sure that Rob didn't upset you enough that you'll come back.
And I apologize, Rachel. I wanted to have you on because I ask a lot of questions, and sometimes when I rephrase a question, I'll cut back in to rephrase it just to kind of simplify it. But I love having you on. Thank you.
Yeah, I really want to get you back on because I'd love. Do you ever come home? Or I'm assuming your home is still in Calaveras somewhere.
It is. Yeah. I am planning to be out there in a few weeks. Actually, I'm not sure totally what our plans are, but I do come home from time to time.
So is your maiden name Barry? Or are you married, or is that your last name?
I just got married in October, but I did not change my last name. So
because
my maiden name is
Calaveras, if you're from Calaveras, do you know? Oh God damn it! I almost said it. Do you know the Barry Towing?
No. Oh yes, I do. I do actually. I got trapped in the mud once and got pulled out by them, but not related.
Okay, I am. That's why I had to ask.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, small world. So yeah, it's so if you come home, my God, I would absolutely love to have you in studio in here.
Awesome.
I mean, I love having the Zoom. I love this, but interaction face to face is so much better, right? And I mean, yes, this is going to be coming out probably in about 2 to 3 weeks. It'll be coming out. Once again, I'm going to, like I said, there's so much more I could ask. But
I've got
I know,
and questions written down. But I want to say thank you first.
Oh my God, thank you.
Just the talk that we've had, you have helped me be able to help the next guy.
Right.
So much. I don't want to say faster, but more efficient.
More efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
thank you, Rachel.
Well, yeah. Thank you guys for having me.
The very beginning of this, I said, I want to help, right? Whatever I can do. When I left, on New Year's Day, I got to go down sorry, I get emotional with this shit. I got to go down New Year's Eve. I got to go down to a behavioral center in Merced. They called me for the AA hotline. I thought I was going down to help a group of AA people in a rehab, and I actually ended up being at a behavioral center. They weren't even there for rehab. And I got to sit there for about an hour and 20 minutes to talk to this group of people that were in there, just all fighting behavioral issues. And I left
like
there.
Rachel's specialty, kind of.
Yes. And I left there and I just kept telling myself, I got to do more. I need to do more. I need to do more. What can I do to do more? Right. I'm always wanting to help. I have a full-time job. My life doesn't allow me to just take off and sit in these things. I have to, I love my job now. I love my job, and I do, but this podcast, I want to spread because this is how I'm helping, right? This is how Rob and I are helping.
It's another avenue to help whoever.
Well, this is how I do it, right? This is how I go into H&I, I go into the jails, I go into
that's another avenue that you use,
yeah,
which is
I
awesome.
go into the institutions because this is my desire to help more people. And by you coming on here, you help us, draw in a little bit different crowd. You put a little,
you legitimize us,
legitimize us in a little bit of a way. And I was just getting ready to say that. And you help us to understand, because one of the things I don't want to do is I don't want to give false information to anybody, right? I don't want to say something on here that's going to cause somebody else to go in another direction. I don't want to do that. So being able to call on you every once in a while is huge for Rob and I to be able to do this, to have you come on, when you get back down here, when you come home, please let me know.
If you have
please
time
let us know. I would love to have you. I'm outside of Oakdale in Waterford area. I would love to have you in the studio.
We could take your husband out for dinner and do all this. Yeah.
Rob.
Awesome.
Yes.
Love it. Thank you guys.
You overselling it, Rob.
No.
She already said she was going to come.
I'm not overselling it. It's good. Let me have it.
Hey, Rachel, we bust each other's balls, but there's nobody in this world that I love besides my wife more than that man right there. He helped put my life back together. So anyways,
I'm a graduate student, so we love free meals.
Well, we will feed you. I promise you. We will feed you. Remember I told you I was 405 pounds?
Love it.
I got a wife that loves to cook. We won't take her to dinner. My wife will cook for her.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So anyways, all right, Rachel, thank you so very much. Please stay in touch with me and I'll stay in touch with you. I will never share your number with Rob. I promise you.
I've got questions.
Thank you guys so much. It was so great to finally meet you.
You too,
and
Rachel.
I will absolutely stay in touch. Message me whenever. And we can
when I have this, I'll edit it and I'll print it up. I'll send it to you. And that way you can listen to it and make sure that you're okay with it before I send it out into the wide, wild west.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Rachel. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye.
Rachel.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us today.
We hope you learned something today that will help you.
If you did not, come back next week and we'll try again.
If you like what we heard, give us a 5-star review. If you don't like what you heard, kiss my... You can't say that, can you? Anyway, if you don't like what you heard, go ahead and tell us that too. We'll see what we can improve. We probably won't change nothing, but do it anyway.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Come back next week and hopefully something will be different and something will sink in. Take care.
This has been Recovery Unfiltered.